Likewise also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, The Lord rebuke thee. But these speak evil of those things which they know not, but what they know naturally as brute beasts. In those things they corrupt themselves. Woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah. These are spots in your feasts of charity, when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds they are without water, carried about of winds, trees whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots.
Good morning, everyone. You can hear me, right? Okay. Sometimes I forget to do the test beforehand, so I have to do it right up here. I came in today and I heard John giving the lesson. And once again, he was giving a lesson on the exact same thing that I was planning on preaching on. So, you just might have some overlapping going on for those of you who were here for the Sunday school lesson. I don't plan this. I don't even have a copy of the book, but it is fun when they coincide. Amen. Before I really get into it, though, I want to tell you a little story about a time when I had a small DVD player. I'm not sure how many of you have seen these, but they're designed to go in cars for car rides and that sort of thing. And it's just a little 7-inch screen DVD player. You can plug it right into the outlet in the car, or you can plug it into an outlet at home. It has two. Now, I had one, and it was on its last legs. Are you preaching today? You can come up and help me. Okay, so I had a DVD player that was on its last legs. The screen was having trouble. It didn't flip quite right. And then the plug started to come apart. And it came apart right at the base where it was entering into that little box that you plug into the wall. And me being who I am and how I am, I thought, well, I can fix this. So I took some wire snips, I snipped off the plug, and I got a spare plug that I had. And I wired it together, and it was a complete cord. I said, hooray, I fixed it. Plugged it into the wall, and it went pop! If I had taken the time to actually look at the box, the little box that plugs into the wall, and read, I would have seen that that box has a computer chip inside of it with little transistor-looking things that is designed to take in 120-volt alternating current and change it into 9-volt direct current. So I took the full bore 120 volts and shot it into this little DVD player that was designed for 9. So no wonder it popped. It was not designed to handle that kind of power all at once. And that is really what we're talking about today. Because power can equip or power can destroy, depending on your preparedness for it. For those of you who don't know, we are reading through the Bible together, for those who participate, at one chapter a day. This week's reading was from 1 Samuel chapters 17 through 23. And last week, obviously, was the 7 chapters before that, and we spoke of Saul, King Saul, and a couple of really big, presumptuous mistakes that he made. This week, we saw him spiral down into full-blown paranoia. But before we get started, let's pray. Heavenly Father, I praise you and I thank you for this day. I pray, Lord, that you would be with us and guide us in all that we do. And I pray that you would give each hearer the message that you would have them to get today from you. In Jesus' name, amen. So we started this week in 1 Samuel 17. And that is one of the most famous passages in all the world among Christians and non-Christians alike. The classic underdog experience. David, little boy, not really little, more like probably around 20, between 17 and 20 years old, versus Goliath, the champion of the Philistines, the warrior among warriors. In order to be a champion in the Philistine army, you had to have 100 confirmed kills every year in battle. This guy stood at 9.5 feet tall. Now, we have giants today. Giantism is caused by a tumor on the pituitary gland. That's not what happened here. This man was not malformed in some way and different from his family from a fluke of nature, but rather he had 4 brothers that were equally as admirable in their stature. These men were of the Anakim, a certain tribe of people that had a reputation and the genetic makeup to get large and have different distinctive markings. One of his brothers had 6 fingers, 6 toes. That was a distinctive mark of that particular tribe, the Anakim. So when David was going up against him, he was filled with faith that God would deliver him. He's no scarier than a bear. A bear stands about that tall. I can take him out just like I'd take one of them. But when we come across the scene of David finding the armies in battle array together, neither one are willing to take the first step. They're lined up, but no one's firing the first shot. They are both afraid of one another. David comes up, says, I can't take this, what this Philistine is saying. He's cursing the people by his gods. And even when David comes up there to fight him, he curses David by all of his gods. I find it somewhat amusing that David returns and curses all of his people by the one true God. Did you ever notice that? The Philistine uses all of his gods to curse David. David pushes that aside and uses God's name to put a curse on all of the people. So David goes up against the Philistine. Saul tries to prepare him, give him one of only 2 swords in the land of Israel at that time, his own sword. He says, I can't use this. I've not tested this. I've not tested this armor. I can't move agilely like I'm used to. So I can't. I'm just going to go to him just like a shepherd, just like I fought with the lion, just like I fought with the bear. I'll go to him with a sling. Goes up and he picks 5 stones and goes against Goliath. Like I said, Goliath had 4 brothers. David picked 5 stones. He wasn't planning to miss. He was preparing for his brothers to come to his defense. So David takes him in hand, and he has the victory. Goes up, smites the Philistine's head, takes it off of him, brings a great victory to Israel. And what happens between him and Saul? Saul offers a reward for the person who would have gone and defeated Goliath. And, of course, David does get that reward. What's Saul's reaction to this? To this young man who has been an instrumentalist in his court. That's all he really knows David as. He's not sure who his father is. Didn't take note of it. He's heard it before because the man is serving in his court, but it's not very noteworthy. It's just a young kid that played the harp for him. And he comes up and defeats a reputable warrior. And it came to pass, as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with timbrels, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day forward. Instantly, he goes from the hero of the hour to the worst person on Saul's list. Now, why is that? There is something that we should understand about Saul and his position of power. Last week we talked about his reluctance to actually take the throne when he was at his coronation. When they were trying to find him, he was hiding away from everybody. When they crowned him, when they recognized him as king, everybody went home and everybody was dispersed. Some people were detractors, and Saul ignored their pleas that he was not able to lead them. Said, well, that's okay. And he went back just to be a shepherd again. He was found in the hills next time they needed a king to lead them. And he came to the defense of Jabesh Gilead. So he was reluctant until war came. And then he continually fought the Philistines. He came against them, he antagonized them, and for 30 years, he has been building this reputation of being a formidable opponent. And he's done so well. He's going up against the Philistines, and they're not willing to break ranks and start the fight. 30 years. And this one little shepherd boy comes up and surpasses him in his reputation overnight. That got to him. That disturbed him greatly. So what does Saul do? Saul's reaction. He doesn't think it's right at this time to go against David personally. Contrives a plan. Says, I'll let the enemies destroy David. He says, I did plan to give my daughter to the person that killed the Philistines, so I'll make a deal with him. I'll ask for a dowry of foreskins of the enemy. Confirmed kills 100 of the enemy. Go do it. Now, he was hoping that David would not return. But not only did David return, he returned with 200. Twice the dowry he requested. Showed himself valiant in war time and time again. Every engagement he proved himself a wise warrior. Very practical and extremely skilled, even though he was young. Saul was jealous of David's rising fame. But he was also jealous of David's ability to take that fame in stride. David didn't shy away from it. But it didn't really puff him up either. His confidence was in God's deliverance, not in his own ability. That was a key difference between the warriors, David and Saul. But Saul didn't see that. He saw a young man that was a threat to his kingdom. When David returned with the foreskins and married Saul's second-born daughter, says in verse 29 of chapter 18, and Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. David was nothing but faithful. Faithful to a fault, as those who attended Sunday school learned today, or at least talked about. David would not raise his hand against the Lord's anointed. And anything that he did do, he felt bad about when he cut off Saul's robe. Didn't quite realize that the full meaning of what he was doing. Rather, he wanted to show his master, I had the opportunity to kill you, and I would not take it, I will not take it. Afterward, he realized the symbolism of what he did and regretted doing so. So after this, some time passes. David proves himself in battle. And Saul spake to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. He realizes he can't touch him on the battlefield. There is something else going on. There is no way that the enemies can overcome David because of how great he is in war. So we're going to have to come up with a new plan. Plans to have him killed. Now, at this point, he doesn't realize that Jonathan has become very close to David, stripped from the same cloth. He tries to get his men to take David from his bed, and his daughter helps him out. His daughter loved David. Made an image, deceives her father, makes up a story so that she doesn't get in trouble. David flees. He goes to Ramah. Spends some time with the prophet, Samuel. At this point, we remember Samuel no longer went to see Saul. Samuel did not inquire of the Lord for Saul any longer. And here's David going to the prophet and staying with him. Saul sends a band of killers to go and get David. They start to prophesy. God protects him. Says, okay, send some more. They start to prophesy. God protects him again. It's fine. If you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. Took up his arms, and he went to kill David. And he prophesied as well. All night long. I could be wrong. I'm fairly certain God was trying to tell him something. It's possible. It's possible that God was attempting some kind of communication with Saul at that point. We really see Saul's corruption when we read what happens next. Saul and Jonathan talk, and he's allowed back into the court. But Saul's a bit finicky. Some have accused Saul of being bipolar. 1 minute he's good, something sets him off, and all of a sudden he's on you like a lion. And we can see that that's a reasonable assumption to make. So David's running for his life again from Saul. He has to escape quickly. And he has nothing with him. No armament, doesn't have men, nothing. And he comes to a priest. And the priest that's serving in the temple of the Lord has no idea that anything is amiss within the king's court. He has no clue that David is anything but a loyal subject. David tells him, hey, the king sent me on a mission. I don't have anything. Do you have bread here? Anything. He says, well, yes, we have bread. Do you have a sword? We only have the sword of Goliath that you killed. He said, yeah, that's a pretty unique sword. Okay, I'll take it. Takes anything that he can get with the blessing of the priest. The priest gives it. There's an Edomite there, Doeg. Sees the whole thing. Now Doeg goes and he tells Saul. Doesn't tell him until Saul's hunting him down. So Saul is after David, coming after him. And he has kind of a pity party, if you want to look at it that way. In front of all his men saying, you have all conspired against me. And Doeg comes up and he says, well, I haven't. I want to be number one. I saw David. He went to this priest. Chapter 22, verse 6. When Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men that were with him. Now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? And all of you have conspired against me, and there is none that showeth me that my son... Don't play with that. Sorry. That my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse. And there is none of you that is sorry for me, or showeth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as at this day. He's paranoid. There comes a time when you have so much power that it acts like a drug. And all of a sudden, the loss of that power becomes the worst thing imaginable. Keep that in mind. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, which was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him victuals, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, and they came, all of them, to the king. And Saul said, Hear now, thou son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, Why have ye conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait, as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king, and said, And who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding, and is honorable in thine house? I didn't know anything about David with that. I thought he was the greatest guy ever. I thought he was the highest man in your court, my king. Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? If you remember, that wasn't mentioned. That's just the accusation of Doeg the Edomite. Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father. For thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. And of course, Saul listened and kept a cool head. No. He was in a rage. He couldn't listen. He would not be reasonable. And the king said, Thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. And the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, Turn and slay the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled, and did not show it to me. But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, Turn thou, and fall upon the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priests, and slew on that day 75 persons that did wear a linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and sucklings, and oxen and asses and sheep with the edge of the sword. He destroyed a city of priests whom he was supposed to protect, that were his subjects. And if you remember, last week we talked about him failing to destroy the enemies of God's people because he thought better of it. Thought, I'd rather sacrifice the best of the spoils than to destroy all of them. But here he destroys an entire city of them because one unwittingly assisted his loyal enemy. At the point of Saul's power going to his head, his danger and jealousy clouding his judgment, this happens time and time again in leadership, where you begin to see your friends as more of a threat than your enemies. At least your enemies are honest and they want to kill you. But can you imagine being in David's shoes? Being nothing but faithful, absolutely true and fervent to serve your king, and he wants you dead. Now, there are a lot more wicked kings than King Saul. Saul had power go to his head. He was not prepared to take on this task of being king. How are we as Christians supposed to handle it when our leaders in government do things we don't necessarily like? Things that we maybe disagree with. Even things that come against us. Luckily for us, in the New Testament, the apostles actually wrote about that very subject. Much of the New Testament was written during the reign of Emperor Nero Caesar, arguably the most wicked ruler in all of history, but definitely the most wicked of all the Caesars. Nero, in his early years, he was okay. He had counsel of a very wise ruler. The same ruler presided at a trial held in Corinth over Paul regarding the Jews and their complaints against him. And he dismissed the charges. Later on, when Paul stood before Nero, he was there again, and he convinced Nero, dismiss these charges. Don't even listen to it. But after that man died, Nero went off the deep end hard. Nero was paranoid, but he was also fundamentally corrupt in what he did. He lit the city of Rome on fire. It could have been an accident, whether or not it was. He blamed it on the Christians to give him an excuse to hunt them down. He would hunt down these Christians, cover them in tar, tie them to a post, and light them on fire as candles at his dinner parties, listening to their screams as they were consumed in the inferno. There's a lot more that you can learn about Nero and his atrocities, but I'll leave it right there, because the rest are a bit graphic. Now, keeping... Yeah, that was the mild version right there. It does get more graphic. Trust me on that one, or you can read the history books that we have back there. So keeping in mind, Nero was the king being referred to at the time when Jude wrote what my wife read earlier. Also, when Peter wrote in 2 Peter, the Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished, but chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness, and despise government. Presumptuous are they, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignities. Whereas angels, which are greater in power and might, bring not a railing accusation against them before the Lord. During the time of Caesar, this is 2 Peter. Peter is almost ready to be executed. Paul has already had his head chopped off by Caesar when Paul is writing this. And he's telling the people that would read this, don't speak evil of dignitaries. The one that just put Paul to death and is about to put me to death and has put countless of your brothers and sisters to death for the offense of following Christ. Not even angels bring an accusation before God. Their sin is between them and God will judge them accordingly. You don't need to be their judge. Paul, again, in Romans, this is a few years before, writes, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be ordained of God. Whosoever, therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resisteth shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then be not afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Governmental rulers. We enjoy criticizing them, especially in America because we have a hand in putting them in office. But truly, they ascend to the seat of power, and it is not apart from God noticing. God knows exactly who is in power. And if we are Christians, we have a direct connection to God. We don't need to revile and forsake our duly elected leaders. Rather, we need to have a conversation. We need to plead with them to the only person that is over them, God himself. They are subject to the authority of our best friend. Think about that. My challenge for you today is if you have never served in public office, you have never truly had the weight of the world on your shoulders. Don't criticize your governmental leaders. Instead, pray for them that God would guide their every decision.